The campaign trail here on Realpolitik, rather. The National Super Alliance have been saying on the campaign trail on several occasions that Jubilee is planning to use the military to hold on to power despite what happens on the 8th of August. Let's listen to that from the NASA presidential candidate, Raila Odinga.
Information at our disposal indicate that these officers will be recruited as polling clerks of the IEBC, of course with instructions from the Jubilee administration on how to behave. A similar exercise took place in the run-up to the 2013 elections. The Jubilee minutes dated Friday, 16th June 2017, described a Raila win as tragic and said President Uhuru Kenyatta would outrightly reject the results and refuse to hand over power. Usitumie ofisa wa serikali vibaya. Wacha wanasiasa wacheze siasa. Bwana Matiang'i anachaguo kama anataka kuwa mwanasiasa awe mwanasiasa. Kama sivyo basi akae kando.
Awachane na watu yangu wadogo wanafanya kazi yao jameni. Sawa sawa. Hana haja ya kila saa ati Matiang'i sijui amefanya nini Matiang'i. Hashindani na Matiang'i jameni, anashindana na mimi.
Let it be a civilian elections, not a military elections. So we don't want our military to be involved in this electoral process.
Asijilete level hiyo. Akitaka kuwa waziri wangu ni sawa, nitampatia kazi baadaye.
Wala watu walitusumbua, tunaambia tunaumia njaa, wanasema wanakula nyama, kazi yetu ni kumeza mate. Sasa tumeamua tutawanyang'anya hiyo nyama tarehe 8 mwezi wa 8. Mwenye alisema nakula nyama, sasa hiyo nyama pamoja na mahali wewe umekuwa ukichomea, wewe hama waachia Raila Amolo. Raila Amolo. Hiyo ndio tumeamua. Hata polisi juzi walisema yeye anaongoza saa hii. Na mimi nataka nimwambie Jubilee, wacha kuthubutu kufikiria mnaweza iba kura ya Wakenya na kuwatisha na polisi. Wacha nimwambie bwana ndugu yangu bwana Boynet, wewe omba msamaha my friend. You cannot tell Kenyans that you are ready for us. Kwani wewe ni nani? Unapenda kupigana na Wakenya milioni 40. Wacha nikwambie, there is nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come. You cannot fight the will of the people. We are tired, Bwana Boynet.
Wamedhihirisha wazi hawako tayari kwa uchaguzi. Sasa wanaanza ugomvi na Matiang'i, hata wanaenda kugombanisha Matiang'i. Sawa hapo. Sisi tunawaambia ndugu yetu bwana Kitendawili, wachana na Matiang'i. Matiang'i kazi yake ni kuhakikisha ya kwamba kuna ulinzi wa kutosha siku ya uchaguzi kwa Wakenya wote.
Uza sera zako, mimi niuze zangu, wananchi watatuamua, sawa? Awachane na watu yangu wadogo wanafanya kazi yao jameni. Sawa sawa. Hana haja ya kila saa ati Matiang'i sijui amefanya nini Matiang'i. Hashindani na Matiang'i jameni, anashindana na mimi. Awachane na Matiang'i afanye kazi yake.
We are telling our competitors, it is not Matiang'i to make up his mind. It is them that should make up their minds. Either they want to be officials of this election or they want to be candidates in this election. And they need to make up their mind whether they want to participate in this election of 2017 or they can as well participate in the one of 2022.
The acting Interior CS, acting Interior CS Fred Matiang'i, featuring very prominently over the last few days on those exchanges on the campaign trail. What is this? What is the bone of contention this month here, from where you sit?
Now, there are several things that are at play. Mr. Raila Odinga has indicated that, in fact, Jubilee wants to use the military to influence the outcome of the polls.
Yes.
And if it does not serve their interest, then Jubilee is unlikely to hand over power. And in my view, I think that statement is unacceptable. Because you know for a fact that the Kenyan military is probably the most disciplined in Africa. When all our neighbors were engaging in coups, attempted coups, and a lot of blood because of indisciplined forces, the Kenyan military has been able to stand out as a shining beacon in the world. It's for that reason that they invited for peacekeeping all over the world. And if Mr. Raila Odinga has got solid evidence, then he needs to table that evidence in a news conference instead of just making those pronouncements. And it's important for Mr. Raila Odinga to be reminded that in as much as right now he's not an elected leader, his words are very powerful because up to 50% of Kenyans take whatever he says to the bank. As far as they're concerned, these 50% of his irrational supporters, his word is as good as law. His word is as good as the gospel. So he needs to be very careful. And you recall in the past, he's made statements on corruption, which have come to pass. But the issue of the military, he needs to be very careful because that's an institution which is respected. In as much as it's got many shortcomings, but when you look at it on a balance of probability, they're doing a very good job. When you come to Dr. Matiang'i, the reason why Mr. Raila Odinga seems to be concerned is that the current cabinet, all of them know for a fact that if President Kenyatta wins, all of them are going home. There's no guarantee that if Raila Odinga wins, he's going to retain them in the cabinet because essentially they are political appointees. Now, all political appointees in Kenya have joined the campaign trail, whether they are cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, parastatal heads, and maybe IBC has not been able to flex its muscles on that. And you recall during the Jubilee Manifesto launch, Dr. Matiang'i is among the people who spoke at that podium and told Kenyans that you must re-elect the Jubilee administration. He's actually on record in Kisii having told people in his part of the world that please re-elect President Kenyatta so that I secure my job. And Raila Odinga even complained to the African Union mission, to Thabo Mbeki, that Dr. Matiang'i is not a neutral player in this. His selfish interest is not on the entire electoral process, but his selfish interest is on President Kenyatta winning so that he retains his position. And anybody would understand, even if you're in Jubilee and you're a sycophant number one, you would understand where Mr. Raila Odinga is coming from. Because Dr. Matiang'i has got an insurable interest in a win by Jubilee. Right. But now it's up to Dr. Matiang'i now to come to the open and say, these are the elaborate structures we've placed to ensure that security is guaranteed. And it doesn't matter whether you're from Jubilee or whether you are from NASA, we are going to be free and fair in enforcing our legal expectations. Like, for instance, you know, there's a regulation, and Kavemba knows this very well, that after you cast your ballot, you're not supposed to be within 400 meters to the polling station. But a number of the NASA guys have said we're going to adopt these polling stations, that after we cast our ballots, we respect that we don't need to be within 400 meters, but probably you're going to be 500 meters away. So essentially, as it is, they're not breaking any rule. So for Dr. Matiang'i to come and say that that's not acceptable, the NAS is beginning to raise eyebrows on that. But on IBC, they need to enforce these Chapter 6 and the Leadership and Integrity Act to ensure that the playing field is level, so that if you are in NASA, you do not complain about the role of these political appointees holding critical positions in government.
Mutinda, what is your take on the so-called attack on Matiang'i by the NASA principals?
Now, there is the issue of the military first. You see, Matiang'i actually is not in charge of the military.
That's a different issue, of course.
Yes. That's why I didn't get where the connection with Matiang'i and the military came in from. But before I talk about Matiang'i, I wanted to address the issue of the military, because I also am among the people who don't believe that our military would allow to be politicized. I think they know what that means. And it would really be improper, because clearly the armed forces, all the disciplined forces are subservient to the civilian rule, and they should pledge loyalty to whoever has been given the mandate by the civilians. So that is what the Constitution says. That's why the Commander-in-Chief is the person we elected as president in 2013. So I think they are disciplined enough, they are wise and intelligent enough to know that it is not going to be in the interest of the country, neither in their own interest, to try to take that route. And I am not very sure where that was coming from. You know, sometimes you can have some insecurities within yourself and you decide to make them public. Some of these things are actually coming out as such. But for Matiang'i, let me say this. You see, there is the police, and the police is not Matiang'i. If you have read our Constitution very clearly, there are actually the CS internal security can only engage with the police on matters policy. And even then, his directives have to be in writing. The person who needs to take up his space and assert himself more is the Inspector General of Police. Because according to me, and Matiang'i might have invited this to himself, because honestly some of the statements he made are not within his mandate to make. It is the Inspector General, because the law is very clear. If you go to read to Article 245 4B, it is very clear that there are things that the Inspector General can direct, the CS internal security can direct the Inspector General, but one of them is not on how to enforce the law.
Right.
So if there is going to be any violation, it is the Inspector General who needs to come out very clearly and warn Kenyans or notify them of what they will accept and what they will not accept. When Matiang'i does that, then it is him who invites all these kind of attacks. To me, there should be two bodies that should take charge of what will happen around the electoral areas. One of them is the IEBC. And for your information, at that particular point of the election, the police is working with the IEBC, because the person who is in charge of the election is the IEBC. And they have the security apparatus answerable to them at that particular time, so that in case anybody is in violation of anything to do with the election, then they can come in to help them, because they have the power of enforcement. So those two bodies need to assert themselves more and leave no room for any of these other people, including the CS, to come up and look like he's usurping some of their roles.
All right. So here's one. It is a three-pronged allegation by NASA. There's a military that Raila Odinga says has intelligence about. There's the issue, beef with Matiang'i, the acting interior CS. And then there's what the Bomet governor, Isaac Ruto, is saying, that police are intimidating Kenyans, saying that Boynet should not say, we are ready for you. I mean, what's your take on all that?
I think if you look at the three things, you'd actually understand where NASA is coming from, where Raila and the Bomet governor, are coming from. Unfortunately, dragging the military into this is a risk that Raila is taking, because if he wins the election, he'll become the commander-in-chief. And therefore, there's a way in which you cannot then start questioning the discipline of our forces. But I wouldn't fault Raila for that. I would actually give him credit for taking that risk, for the simple reason that enough times he has said a number of things that have come to pass. And we cannot, therefore, just wish this one away. And it is unfortunate the way the Jubilee side of the political divide is responding to this with condescending attitude. I think it's not a political issue. They should not even be dealing with it. It's something that probably the military should come out and assert itself and say, you know what, we are a disciplined force. Politicians should do their politics, us will do our thing. And to that extent, I think it's a risk that Raila has taken, which, only time will tell whether he had, a reason to take that risk. But on Matiang'i and the Inspector General of Police, I think it's clear-cut. There's nothing Raila can do about Matiang'i. Matiang'i is a political appointee, and he has come out to be a very selfish one, going to Kisii and telling people that you need to elect Uhuru Kenyatta because I need to secure my job is in itself very selfish and unfortunate that a person of his stature can make that statement. There is a way you can do that. There are so many cabinet secretaries, for heaven's sake. And he said that before he even became the cabinet secretary in charge of Interior, an acting cabinet secretary. So I think it's unfortunate that Raila has to deal with that, because even if he was the president, his cabinet secretaries would go out of their way to ensure that he retains the seat. So the manner in which they are coming out to go about their business is what is probably kind of irritating, that you don't have to rub it in the opposition faces, that you are outrightly campaigning for one side of the political divide.
Is Kenya ever going to resolve this issue? Where do we draw the line? The cabinet secretaries should actively get involved in politics?
I think the line, the moment we have these people appointed by the president, then endorsed by Parliament, which almost always will have the president, party dominate, we are not going to resolve this. I mean, we have a parliamentary system that seems to be giving too much power to the president. And to that extent, it doesn't matter who becomes the president. This is something that will keep on recurring, But I think for the Inspector General of Police, intimidation of the public is totally wrong. And I think he needs to apologize, just like the Bomet governor said, that they need to come out and tell people that we are not ready for the public, but we have measures in place to take care of any troublemaker. And you know, the troublemaker may be a troublemaker who is causing trouble for NASA, not necessarily for Jubilee, you know. And therefore, their communication needs to be very clear that this is not a question of protecting Jubilee from trouble. It is not a question of protecting NASA from trouble. It is a question of protecting the interest of Kenyans. Because whatever Kenyans are going to do, they'll vote somebody who is going to take care of their interests. So it is only prudent that we have a security force and a police force that will ensure that this happens in a very free and fair
I would want to say something on that note of the police, especially on the IG coming out. Because you see the headline that was on the papers do their things their way. And, you know, when the IG was reported to have said that we are ready for you, he probably meant for those who are out to cause mischief. And it is important for the IG. That's why I said they need to assert themselves more. So I want to differ with him on that.
But
the
he did correct. You know.
The IG needs to come out very clearly. And, you know, one of the functions of the police is to deter crime. And one of the things they need to do is to communicate their readiness for anybody who's out to cause mischief. I don't see anything wrong with that unless you are out to cause mischief. And if you're out to cause mischief, of course, you should be ready for the consequences. So for the IG, I have no problem. How it was brought out by the papers is a different matter altogether. But for him to come out and assure us that every Kenyan will be secure, and that there will be... No. I'm saying that because, let me tell you what happened. There were pictures of all those acquired machineries, and then there was the title, "We are ready for you." Please, you know, when you contextualize things, that all actually looked very offensive. You know, the way it was brought out by the papers, it looked like an intimidation. And that's why I wouldn't want to blame the IG for how his message was brought out. But he has a right, and he should continue asserting himself that law and order will be maintained irrespective of the results of the election, because that is what he's employed to do, maintain law and order.
But allow me to make 2 points. The Leadership and Integrity Act bars public servants, apart from cabinet secretaries, from engaging in politics. And the only way this one can be brought to an abrupt end is when you have the Directorate of Public Prosecutions or the CID investigating these top public servants who are barred by the Leadership and Integrity Act, prosecute them, commit them to jail. That way, if you do it, then we are going to stop that. Then number 2, in theory and in paper, the Inspector General of the Kenya Police Service is independent, an autonomous body. He moves on his own motion. But to assume that that's the case in Kenya, we'll be engaging in pretense. That's not the case. There's no way Kavemba can make me believe that the Inspector General today will do anything not consistent with the expectations of President Kenyatta or Dr. Matiang'i. In as much as he's supposed to be receiving instructions that are written, I suspect, because he's a political appointee as well, because you even recall, his vetting raised a lot of issues. But since the Jubilee administration had decided that this gentleman is going to be the Inspector General of Police, he got the position. And it's not as if to say that he's the sharpest tool in the shed. No, there are many other people who are qualified to get this position, and he was among those people who are qualified. So he got that position, and he knows that his job is only safe and secure if President Kenyatta is in office. The moment President Kenyatta is not in office, is going to be among those political appointees who are going to take our walk home. Now, when we want to build our democracy, that is not we need to get people of strong goodwill, people like the later Major General Kaiseri, who love the nation called Kenya more than they love the politicians. And in as much as I know Kavemba wants to talk about the security
but this was what are you basing that on?
If there's anybody...
Comparing the IGP, Boynet, and his dealings and how Kaiseri maybe used to do his work, you seem to be differentiating them.
You know, with the kind of training that Kaiseri had, he was loyal to the state. He's the kind of person who would look at the President Kenyatta, say no. You'd look at the person who opened foreign political doors, Mr. Raila Odinga, and say no. When you look at the Inspector General, he doesn't have that capacity. And in as much as we talk about the security of Kenya, if somebody takes over today as the President of the Republic of Kenya and he calls a top public servant to his office at State House and he says, Mr. Esbon, I want you to tender your resignation, they'll do it immediately. In fact, most of these are senior appointments. When you're getting an appointment letter,
when you're
getting the appointment letter, you also tender in your resignation, and the only thing which remains is to be signed.
I want to give him an evidence that we have Kenyans who can stand their ground. The Auditor General there has been several attempts to force him out of office. Is he still not there? Because he has stood his ground. And that is the kind of, the reason why some of these independent constitutional offices are not working is because of the nature of the people manning them. If all of them had the kind of backbone that the Auditor General has, then we would be seeing a very different Kenya. The judiciary is starting to develop that kind of backbone to even give the decisions that are not acceptable to the executive. That is how we are going to enjoy this constitution, if all independent constitutional bodies learn to assert themselves. I said that because the IG has a 4-year security of tenure term. If there will be no reason, because there are also reasons, the president actually, in the constitution, is the one who can fire the IG. But it is clear on what basis. So if the IG decides to resist, and then we go to court, and it is proven that the president wants to fire him outside any of the provided, then the court will, and that is how we are going to develop a mature democracy when we test these institutions. That has always been my point. So he's arguing, let me tell you what there was a lady called Grace Kindly, and this is a fact. She resisted because she had security of tenure. She was bullied out of office, and unfortunately Kenyans watched and stood by. That was pure intimidation, and it worked. But it does not always have to work. That is why in the case of Edward Ouko, it has not worked. That was just the point, that it doesn't have to be automatic if you stand your ground. You need to remember Kimaio. Kimaio resigned voluntarily. Why did he resign? There is provision for resignation, even among those who have security of tenure. So let's not argue ignorantly. So what I'm saying is, if, for instance, Kimaio had decided to stay put, trust me, it would have taken a court process to remove him there. That is what I'm trying to say. Only that he made his compromises, which were his choice and his right, and he left. The person who played hard was the other lady, but she actually even at some point went to court, and we're waiting to see whether she's going to be paid damages or not. And I actually think she will be paid. But the thing is, you can resist being bullied.
Thanks.
Yes.
All right.
But then anybody who's worked in the public service, especially in the security, or rather in the security sector, knows that the security of tenure is also in theory. Mr. Kimaio, for some reason, imagined he had security of tenure when he was forced to resign. I doubt whether Kimaio woke up one day in the morning and he said, because of the horrible state of security in Kenya, let me take a walk. He resigned most likely because of a lot of pressure.
Yes.
Now, this pressure is the one which is supposed to, the security of tenure principle is supposed to immunize these office holders from this pressure. So he did not say one day wake up in the morning, enjoy a cup of tea, then say, I'm unable to manage security in Kenya, let me plunge into politics. The person who wanted to resist that, Grace Kindly, right now, wherever she is, she's licking her wounds. So there's no way we would sit here and say, wait a minute, the security of Kenya. Even if you go to the US, when you speak about the FBI director, Mr. Comey, even him imagined that in as much as you've got a very solid democracy, he was going to play ball according to the rule of law and order, and he would stay in office. But he woke up one day in the morning and he found
the law allowed that to happen.
Go. Right. But the question is, did they move on their own motion?
I think the biggest thing about security of tenure is, and we talked about this last week, that there is a sense in which a lot of us in Kenya today holding public office don't have that goodwill to serve the interests of the public. And therefore, that security of tenure is now used, to enjoy the privilege of serving the powers that be, rather than get the security of tenure delivered to the public irrespective of what the powers that be want. And it is a very unfortunate situation in so many of these offices that occupy, whose occupants enjoy the security of tenure. They've used it to their advantage to serve the interests of the establishment. And, you won't be shocked when some of these officers will leave office and venture into politics. And we've seen, Kimaio left the position of the IG, went into politics. I don't know where he disappeared to. But I think having said that, it's also important to note that there is no difference between some of these officers that we are talking about, Nkaiseri, Boymet, Matiang'i. I think they all mean well for Kenyans, and they also want, because at a personal level, you also need to protect your interests, even as you serve the nation. But I think they have a big problem with communication, especially the Inspector General of Police. And I think the communication specialists there need to start earning their money. That when you have things that are going to mitigate any violence, you need to be proactive in the way you're going to communicate them. You need to understand that when we unleash these pictures, we need to know the consequences that we are going to have from Kenyans, so that you act on them before.
We have to leave it there, gentlemen.
Can I say something just to
we really have to wind up. Really have to wind up. Okay, 20 seconds.
Yeah, no, I wanted to remind you about the former EACC
You've
commissioners.
had a lot of
the former EACC commissioners, you know, because there are people who have complied with the intimidation, there are others who have not. It would be wrong to give the notion that all of them have to accept being bullied. Then why did we take time to entrench this?
But all the ACC bosses have all been bullied.
No, that's what I wanted to tell you. Mumba Matemu was bullied. The Jane Kane was bullied.
That's security of tenure.
They had security of tenure, but you know what they did? They accepted to be bullied. So that's why at the end, they wrote a letter of resignation. I want to remind you of one outstanding Kenyan, Edward Ouko. They've even tried to do it in parliament. He has resisted, and he's still the auditor.
You only have one
That example. Is the spirit of the people who should occupy these offices.
All right.
Ben, Ouko is supposed to be the norm, not the extreme.
The exception.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the norm.
Exactly. But you people are urging on the others who are acting differently to continue acting that.
We need a full show on serving the republic versus serving the power that be.
Yes.
Many thanks for joining us, for staying with us here on Sunday edition. It is 11:30 p.m. this Sunday morning. When we come back after this quick commercial break, we review the last presidential debate, that is the running mates debates. And of course, look forward to tomorrow's big one, the expected, the presidential debates, and just see what has been happening. What does this mean for the various political outfits and the presidential campaigns? Don't go too far.
This is KTN News.